Welcome to episode 4 of Learning Photoshop from the Beginning. So far, we've learned how to set up your workspace, and we've gone over most of the tools to get you started. Today, we're going to start to pinpoint what tools are used in selecting. Learning how to select something in Photoshop coming up. Hi, I'm Terry Vanderheiden, and I'm your tour guide today on this journey of learning Photoshop. One of the key features in Photoshop is selecting. The process of selecting something in an image is used all the time in Photoshop, from retouching to color changing to compositing. Anytime you want to do work on just one portion of an image without changing any other parts of the image, you most likely will need to make a selection. For example, if you have, say, an image of a bird against a sky and you want to place that bird against a more interesting background, you'll need to select the bird out of the sky. And you will have to make a good selection to make this look believable. Now, at last count, there are like 19 different ways to select something in Photoshop. Some of those modes or making selections have been around for since the very beginning of Photoshop. But there are some relatively new ways for making selections that have been developed in the advent of AI in Photoshop. Each way to select something has its own merits, and we'll eventually go over all of them. So let's get started learning selections in Photoshop. So here we've got an image opened up. I've made a few copies of it on my layers palette, and we'll get into layers a little layer. Actually, I think that layers are probably the most important thing in Photoshop, but the second most important thing is learning selections, and that's what we're going to start today. So as we go down on our tools, over on the left side here, you can see these are selection tools. So we're going to start real simply with the rectangular marquee tool. So a selection is taking, let's go ahead and zoom up on this. A selection is taking an area that you might want to highlight, and in this case, we're going to drag a box around it. And so this area here is selected. All the pixels inside of these marching ants. And as we zoom up, we can see this is just one set of pixels that is being selected. So all the pixels inside of this dotted line are going to be selected. So as an example, if we wanted to copy that and paste it onto its new layer, I'll show you a quick one to do that. And that is shortcut Command J. And what that does, it takes everything that you had inside of that selection. Let's go ahead and knock these out for a second. Takes everything that you had inside of that selection and puts it on its own layer. So Command J will do that for you. So remember, that's a good shortcut. You'll use it all the time. So you have the ability to select in every image that you work on. And with using the marquee tool, generally, as you can imagine, since it's a rectangle, this is for selecting things that are rectangular. So let's go ahead and zoom up on this and we'll see how this works. Let's go ahead and take our tool and we're going to drag it over and select just inside this window frame. And that's pretty decent, does a pretty good job. And then every time you make a selection, Photoshop brings up this panel for you to take a look at in case you want to do something else with it. Really cool panel once you get used to it, but for right now we're gonna hide this panel off to the side. And so inside of here is our selection. So everything that's inside of these dotted lines that are moving dotted lines are selected. Now here's something that you'll find. Let's go in and take a look here. We'll zoom up even a little bit more. And we can see that our dotted lines are surrounding the inside of this window. I will make a new layer here, and what we're going to do is grab our paintbrush and we'll paint in red. So let's go ahead and grab red. And as we paint, you can see that whatever we painted was inside of these lines. So let's say those lines were kind of bothersome. They're maybe distracting us a little bit. The way to get them out of the way for now is Command H or Control H on the PC. And so they're still there. So watch what happens. They're still there. the selection is still there rather, but the lines, the dotted lines, the marching ants are not there. So this is a way that we can work on an image without having to see those lines there if it's a little bothersome. Okay, we can just get them out of the way so we don't have to look at them. So inside of here, so in this case particularly, let's go back in and let's say, for instance, we've selected this. We know we've selected this. We'll get rid of this layer now. We know we've selected this window. And let's go ahead and use our gradient tool. We touched on that the other day. So let's go ahead and grab the radial gradient, which is a round shape to it. And let's change our color to yellow. We'll make it like maybe even a little bit orange. Yeah, we'll make it a little more gold looking. There we go. And when we go up to our gradient, we have our three choices on the basic gradient, which is the color into white, which is merging these two colors down here where you have your color palette open. Or we're going to take our main color, which is the top color, and we're going to go into transparency. So we have our parameters set. We've got transparency from our foreground color, which is yellow, into transparency. We've got the radial gradient, which is going to give us a round gradient. Our color is selected down here. We got our gradient selected. We have our selection in place, but what we're going to do is hide it. So we'll go Command H or Control H and hide that so we don't have to look at it. And then watch when we grab and we drag this gradient across, we've just made a little bit of a glow in that room of that house. So we'll pull back a little bit and see what that looks like. And it kind of looks a little bit like there's a light on in the house. So, you know, not bad, but it enables us to start creating things by selecting on a rectangle. So I took the liberty, let's undo that. I took the liberty of making a selection, and we're just going to load the selection. So let's go over this for a second. So let's say you've made a selection here and you want to save it. So we're going to go ahead and drag it around that window, for instance, and we want to save that. So we can go up here to select, and this is the pull down menu for select. And then you come all the way down and you can say save selection. And so that selection, you can name it top window. So whenever then if you get rid of this selection, which is Command D or Control D, turns the selection off. And let's say you've made another selection over here. You made a selection and blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, oh, I want this selection back. Well, you can go up here and go to select and then go to load selection. So you can load the selection that you used before. So top window, we'll load that, click OK. And you can see that selection of exactly what we did before, as well as in the proper spot, is returned to us. So that's a way you can save your selections if you like as you go along. Another way is to just, if this was an area you wanted to affect at some point, you could just do that shortcut Command J, put it up on its own layer, and then later you could come back to it and make changes to it. So that's two ways to save your selection. So I actually went ahead and did some selecting earlier because it does take a little bit of time. That's the thing with selecting. It does take a little bit of time. So let's go ahead and select the upper windows, and we'll we'll put in our save selection. We're going to load another selection, which is going to be the lower windows. Click OK. And you can see that we can load in whatever it is we want to load in on our selection. So let's do that one more time. Select, load selection, and we're going to choose upper windows. So now we have our upper windows selected. You can see because of the dotted lines, the marching ants running around. So let's go ahead and do that same technique we did earlier with the gradient tool. And we will zoom up a little bit. And we'll take our gradient and just drag a radial gradient from the side. It'll create some light inside that room. And let's come over to this one and we'll draw some radial gradient over from that side. And we'll go ahead and hide the marching ants, hide the selection. And you can see that, oh, now we're putting in some light in that room. So we also, let's go ahead and select load a selection of the lower windows that I already did. And we'll do the same thing. Take here, grab and drag it up. You don't have to remove the selection. I find it's a little easier to hide it. So Command H or Control H will hide that selection. And again, we'll just drag up a little bit of light from there. So that probably doesn't look quite right. Light would come down from the ceiling maybe. So let's do it like that. And don't like that. Let's try it one more time. There, that's a little bit better. So you can start putting lights in a room that didn't exist in the first place. And the reason we can do that is because we made a selection. And the selection that we made is around inside of each of these window panes. So to make it look more realistic. So with selections, you want to make sure that they're as realistic as possible when you're making a selection. So let's go ahead and get rid of this for now. We're not going to save this. Let's open up another image, go back into Lightroom. Let's open up this tennis ball, edit in, Photoshop. As always, I like to come out of Lightroom and into Photoshop, because then if I save this, it's going to go back into Lightroom saved. So let's go to the next one down, which is the elliptical marquee. Now we can take this and we can drag it around, and now we're making ovals and circles, right? So a way we can do this is we can hold the shift button down and move our selection. Keep going. We'll just keep moving it until we get to a point where it's covering everything that we want to select. So there, it's pretty much covering the tennis ball. And now let's take our paintbrush and we're going to paint across. You can see that we're only affecting inside of this tennis ball, not the outside. So let's go ahead and tone that down a little bit. There's a couple of ways to tone that down. And in Photoshop, whenever you make a move, you have the ability, right after you make the move, to fix that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up to Edit, and this is Fade the Brush tool. So almost all of your tools will have this fade possibility. So when we click on this, if you remember, we started at 100%, but now we can slide this down after the fact and get it to the point of what we want. So if we're trying to create a better shadow for that ball, this is how we do it, and you can do it afterwards. So this is sometimes a more convenient way to work with your brushes, is to alter them after you've brushed. So let's do that one more time. Let's go undo. So we have our selection that we've made. We made it with the oval selection of the Marquee tool. We've got our brush tool. We're painting in black, and we're set at 100%. So let's go ahead and hide that. Command H or Control H will hide that selection. And let's go ahead and paint our new shadow. And I didn't like that. Let's do that again. There, our new shadow is in place. It's obviously extreme, but we can go up here, go to Edit, fade the tool brush, and slide this down and get to what looks realistic. So now we have a way, we make a selection, and the selection allows us to work only inside of that image, and we've basically guarded the rest of the file and only allowing us to work inside of this image. So the flip side of this is that, let's say we want to change that, we want to alter that. So let's take our selection, we'll go Command H and bring it back, and this time we're going to go Shift Command I. And what Shift Command I does, hopefully you can see this here on YouTube, is we have just switched the selection. You can see that the marching ants are going around everything outside, but not the ball. So we have just inverted the selection. And that was, the shortcut again was Shift Command I for invert. And every time you do that, it switches back and forth. So switch Command I, or Shift Command I will allow us to now alter the background. So if we wanted to alter the backgrounds in some way, we could do that. So now this is an open area that we can go ahead and, well, let's go ahead and do this. Let's open a new file. Actually, let's go back into Lightroom here, see what we've got for files. Well, let's just take this house again. And we'll open that up. And what we're going to do is we're going to select all this in the way we select inside of Photoshop. By the way, if you get in here and you're just seeing your images floating on an empty background, just hit the Photoshop tag right down there of the icon and it'll bring back all of your parameters, which is great to have. Sometimes Photoshop will think you just want to work on an image or look at an image, but in this case we always want to have our backgrounds in order so that we have our options available and our tools available. And you do that by just clicking on the icon, the logo down for Photoshop. So let's take this and we're going to select the entire image. And the way we select an entire image is Command A, or on the PC, Control A. So we've copied it, and now we're going, this is similar to copying and pasting in Word and whatnot. So Command C, we're going to copy it. So Command A selects it all. Command C or Control C copies it. And then we come over here and we're going to paste it in. So if we were just to paste it, it wouldn't be, let's try it. Let's go Command V and paste, and see it just pasted right over the whole image, right? That's not what we wanted to do. So let's undo that. And let's go up here and go to Edit and go Paste Special and go Paste Into. So what we're going to do is we're telling Photoshop that image we have of the house, we wanted it pasted into the selection we made. So if you recall, we made the selection of the ball and then we inverted it, and now we have just the background in place. So let's go ahead and do Paste Into, and now we have the ball, say, in front of this house picture. So we can get rid of this. We don't need this anymore. Let's get rid of that. And as we look at this, we see we have over here on our layers palette, when you do that sort of thing, Photoshop creates a mask for you. We'll get into masks. That's a whole nother thing, but a really cool feature of Photoshop. But suffice it to say, we've now got this image behind our tennis ball. So now, in many cases, when you're doing a simple composite like this, you're going to want to change the size of the image. So the way we do that is we go into Edit and go down here. We go to Transform, and we're going to go to Scale. So what that does, it puts this little brackets around it with these little anchor points and enables us to now scale this image. So we're going to enlarge it by just dragging it out. Let's go ahead and see what we've got. We can see everything this way. So now we're just going to drag this out. And now we have, not that it makes a lot of sense, but we have the tennis ball in front of the house. So this is a simple composite where we're able to select the tennis ball and then invert the selection, and then in the background we can drop some other image if we want. And you'll see later as to why this is kind of important as we're learning selections, is to be able to select things, do work on them, and we're able to then make composites among other things that we can do with these selected images. But you need to be able to select the image first. So let's get out of here. Don't save. Let's open another one. All right, we have a new picture here that we brought up, and we're going to grab our Marquee tool and make sure we do a selection here. Let's zoom this up just a little bit. Position it with our little hand, grab our Marquee tool, and let's go ahead and see if we can draw a selection around this basketball. So if we hold the Shift key down, you're going to make a perfect circle as a selection. And that's pretty close. But if you hold your finger on the space bar, now you can move that selection and get it into position the way you want it. So there we go. We did a pretty good job. We're a little over on this side here, and we've actually just moved it just a little bit. But once you've made the initial selection, you can kind of refine it a little bit. So here's a way we do that. We go up into Select, and then we can transform the selection. So this gives us the ability to start moving things around a little bit, and we can transform this selection to fit our needs the way we want it by just dragging these little anchor points and changing the size of this selection to fit exactly what we're trying to select. So that's a way that you can select, and let's go ahead and change this. Since it's selected, we're going to go ahead and bring up our colors. And let's go ahead, and this is our color balance. So let's go ahead and make it, we'll make it a little more yellow. And we'll do it on the highlights as well. Make it yellow. And the shadows, we'll make it yellow. And maybe add a little bit of green in the shadows. And then we've made this very strange looking color of a ball. But again, we're just affecting what's ever inside of the selection. So building a selection, you have the ways to manipulate and add things to a selection. So with this, we're going to just delete all this and revert it back to where we were. So we now know how to make two selections. We can use the Marquee tool, which is the rectangle. We can also do the elliptical and make our selection. Single row is seldom used, but occasionally it might be used to select out just a row of pixels. That's just one set of pixels as it goes along there horizontally. So not something we're going to have a lot of use for, but occasionally. Let's go back to our elliptical. So the next section down is also tools for selecting, and this is the lasso tool. And what the lasso tool does is this is freehand. So let's grab our tool and we're just going to draw around the watch as best as we can with a mouse. Come up here underneath the watch band and then around these little areas and then back till it connects. And then we let it go and we can see here, we'll zoom up on it. So not a great selection by any means, but now we can do some altering to it. And the way we alter a selection, we keep with that same lasso tool. And you see here, if we say, hold the Option key down, or Alt for the PC, a little minus, see that little minus thing comes up? So that means this is now we're going to minus this selection. So now we just go in here and we draw our line and we take a little bite out of that. And we do the same thing over here. Take a little bite out of it. Up here, just creating just a new line for the selection. You don't have to be perfect, but see, we went a little too far. So that way we take the Shift key and we're going to add to the selection. So this is going to be just add that selection to it. So let's keep going here. We're going to use the minus, which is the Alt or the Option key for Mac. And we're going to just bite off little pieces of this selection until we get it the way we want. Right up here, let's go ahead in here. And we're going to add over here, so we use the Shift key to add. Oh, we went too far, so we're going to subtract. So you can see selecting as we go along. Let's go ahead and add to this selection here. Make sure that this is all, and then piece by piece we can go through and subtract from the selection or add to the selection, whatever it is we want, until we get the selection exactly how we want it. And this can take a little bit of time of doing selections this way. But the idea here is we want to select the exact. Now, here's the thing. We're looking at this at 400%. The reality is most people aren't going to view this much more than 100%. So if we wanted to take this out, let's say, let's go Command C. Well, actually what we're going to do is we're going to take this out and we're going to Command J, put it up on its own layer. So it'll be right up here. And now what we're going to do is alter that color of that, for instance. You don't have to put it on its own layer to do this. We're just doing it because it's a little bit easier. So we'll bring up our color balance again. And let's go ahead and add some yellow to it. Maybe a little bit of red and some magenta. And we'll do that in the highlights as well. And in the shadows, we'll add some orange as well. And now we've changed the look of that watch. You can see here that we've just changed the tones of that watch. And you could probably start thinking, hey, wow, this could be pretty valuable in terms of being able to alter anything that we want as we go through Photoshop. But learning initially how a selection works is so important. Learning how to create a selection that actually is something you can do over and over. So the next section down is polygonal. So this is something where if you wanted to select something with straight lines that wasn't a rectangle, how about this book? We can click here, take one point, and then it'll stretch like a little rubber band. Click, it'll make another point. Click, make another point. Click, another point. Click, click, click. Now we're going around kind of soft edges, so that's not going to be quite as good, but we'll do the best we can. And then what happens is when you get to the end, so see that? It just has this little circle down next to it. That little circle next to it means that we're closing the selection. We're completing the selection. So we click, and then now we have this selection. And you can see here as we zoom up, we didn't do a great job on these hands, so we don't have to use the same selection tool. We can go to a different selection tool. Go back to the freehand lasso tool, and we're going to add to this selection. So we're just going to come up here and add to that selection. Oops. Undo. We're going to subtract from that selection, I mean. So that's the Option key or the Alt key on the PC, and subtract from that selection. So we use the polygonal tool for the straight lines, and we use the lasso tool for the curved lines. So that's a way that you can make selections as you're going through Photoshop. So we've learned so far, we've learned the lasso tool and we've learned the polygonal tool. The magnetic tool is actually a little bit more creative in terms of how it selects. So let's go in and I'll show you how this works. Let's say we wanted to select this skateboard. So we would take this magnetic tool, and what we want to do is we want to make sure that our little plus sign, if you look close at this, there's a little tiny plus sign in the middle of that. And that's where we're going to actually get our selection to start. So we're going to click, and then we're just going to start dragging it around. And Photoshop is going to do the best job possible. And all we're doing is dragging it around, and Photoshop is putting in all these points where it thinks is best to make this selection. And it's using a little bit of AI knowledge to look inside of Photoshop and say, oh, these tones, he's been going with this dark tone of this skateboard, so we're going to avoid the human tones that are there. And again, we're just using that little disc circle of the selection tool to go through and then just select just the areas that are the surfboard cover, if you will, this kind of sandpaper-ish part of the skateboard. And let's bring it back. When we bring it back here, again, it's going to have a little circle there and say, okay, you want to finish this selection. So we click and finish the selection. And we had a couple of mess ups. So an easy way to fix that is go back to the lasso tool, and we're going to hold the Option key down and subtract from that. So we're just going to go right to there. And then we're going to add to it right here because we want to add that portion to it. And now we left a little bot, so we have to go in there and just add it. We can include that in the main selection. There we go. And now you can see that we've now have control over the sandpaper top of that. So we have the ability now, let's go ahead and hide that, Command H, and we'll hide that. And let's go ahead and make that darker. So we can do that by bringing up our levels. That's just Command L. We'll get to levels too when we start doing manipulation. So let's say we wanted to lighten that whole area or darken that whole area even more. We have that ability because we've just selected the top of this skateboard. And if we like that, great. If we didn't like it, we can go into fade levels and slide that back a little bit till we get to the point where we like it. So let's turn that off and on. And you can see what we've done. So selecting is that simple with the Marquee tool and the lasso tools for just rudimentary selecting. Next time we'll get into some more selections. If you're enjoying these free classes on learning Photoshop, I'll make a deal with you. I'll keep making these classes as long as you keep liking, watching, and sharing the videos. So hit the like button and click the subscribe button, and remember to ring the little bell to be reminded of my next video. I have quite a few Photoshop episodes planned, so you won't want to miss any. Now, if you have any questions about some of the topics I've already covered here in these classes, feel free to leave your comments down below. I'll definitely read them and get back to you as soon as I can. Remember, you can always reach me via email at terry@imagelight.com if you'd rather contact me that way. Until next time, this is Terry Vanderheiden. Thanks for watching.